Well, hello everybody. It's been a while. We know.
It's been a while.
Oh man, it's been like 3 weeks or something.
We've changed channels.
Yeah.
I think was the Vengeance the first time that the first one that was on this channel?
Yeah. Vengeance was the one to inaugurate the new Mocast channel. Well, it's not technically new because all of the podcasts, well, almost all of the podcasts are here. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going back to the very first episode and checking once again Frost Death Knight because we missed the Icarus boys, and it's about time to address current state of Frost Decay and what can we expect from the future, and who do we have on today?
Well, you might recognize some faces, and we have a new face as well. One of the top, if not number one, Frost Decay M+. Let's start it with Muffin. Tell the people who you are, man, for everybody who doesn't know what you do, who you are, and things.
Yeah. What's going on with you, Muffin?
Well, I'm a Frost Decay connoisseur, as people would call it. Just been a Frost one-trick since Wrath. And I dabbled a little bit in Unholy last year, but I've just been a very big fan of Mythic Plus since it ever came out. And that's where I just spend my time outside of Raid.
Oh, so no raiding or just when it's necessary?
I do raid, but I mainly do raiding for gear.
Yeah.
For M+.
It's like most of us, I think. All right, thank you so much, Muffin. We'll come around to Muffin and get some more insight from him. Moving along to one of the more I would say staple guests of our DK podcast, Mr. Bicepspump. Tell the people what you do, man. Who you are. Probably they already know, but still, plug.
Hey guys, Bicepspump here. I write the Wowhead DPS DK and the Isoveins DPS DK guides, and I also do video guide content on YouTube. Also hang out lots in the Acris Discord. I'm one of the useful minions out there, and I also dabble in the DPS DK theory crafting community. I
mean, I remember like at the beginning of season 1 in Shadowlands when Biceps came with his Unholy DK in our little group, while leveling and shit, and he was like 20k plus DPS all above all of us. It just goes to show, man. It wasn't any speculating on Unholy DK at the time being uber meta, but still, Biceps is the man to definitely go for and check and like anything you want to learn about Unholy and Frost as well. It's like one of the top dudes. But we also have like 100% theory crafter over here, or am I mistaken?
The big brain, the man behind the curtain.
Do we have a big brain?
Mr. Taze.
Mr. Taze. Tell the people who you are, man.
Hey guys, Taze Neck here. I do a lot of the theory and crafting in the background, as well as writing the APLs for SimC. Basically just telling the Sims how to play the specs, and other than that, that's all I'm really doing right now. I've stepped away from the game for the time being.
Understandable, but valuable work.
I mean, come on, without Taze, we can sim. We would sim and would get apples as result. What does that even mean?
Like you do 3 more apple as DPS, but you gotta check out the prunes. Is prunes still a word in English? Because I'm not sure. All right, so we got to know a little bit the guys. I'm guessing Tazen and Biceps are kind of familiar with from our previous podcasts and stuff. So I guess we'll just dive right into it, since Muffins did mention that he's a big fan of Frost, and this is a Frost Decay podcast. Did we mention this in the intro?
I mean, unless we put it in the title.
Yeah, well, it goes what I was saying. All right, so let's start off with Muffins. So Muffins, can you start talking a little bit about how do you feel Frost Decay is currently, playing, performing in 9.1, and what do you see works, what do you see could be improved upon and stuff like that, and we can carry it on from there.
I mean, I feel like Frost is doing okay, but it's still lacking compared to other classes. Like, it is actually uncapped or quadratic scaling, but all the classes that are getting, going forward at least, are getting uncapped, and we're kind of losing our edge, and we're not really gaining anything. So it's kind of lackluster, I think, going forward at least. But it does have its benefit in pure cleave. And yeah, it has its ups and downs with very low damage outside of cooldowns.
But let me ask you, why would you choose Frost? You personally, Muffin, why would you choose Frost versus Unholy?
I just love breath as a playstyle. Like,
I knew it.
I just love it. I just love how if you're good at it, you can just maximize the damage of it. But if you're not good at it, you just don't do as much. And I just love the playstyle. It's like a risk reward, and I just love that kind of playstyle.
Oh, definitely.
Like the old Void form as well has also would really be my playstyle.
That's a cool mechanic, and that separates people who, excel and people who are just good DKs in general. But I was going to ask about how do you feel about Breath of Sindragosa, because at least the louder community, at least the one that we're a part of, for better or worse, doesn't like Breath of Sindragosa, thinks that it's a pain to maintain. I personally like it, and I feel like without Breath, Frost just doesn't feel complete. More because
did you always like it?
Yes, I always liked it.
Okay.
I liked it even when it was not just on Frost Decay.
Yeah.
But I feel like, at least for Frost Decays, when it's core design, and I think I mentioned this last time as well, it doesn't really have like a good AoE runic power spender. I mean, Glacial Advance. But how do you feel about, at least to your experience, how does Breath work in Mythic Plus? Like, what do you see its pros and cons, and how can you take advantage of it to, get those numbers?
And is the tank responsible for anything?
The tank is always responsible for something. Like, you want your mobs stacked, and Breath is really good in the fact that if you have a prior target in a group, you just sit on it and you pump your main target breath into it, and it'll cleave the rest down evenly. Like take a shard pull in holes. You just pump into that shard because you'll do the highest damage to that target, and it has more health. So you have really good prior damage with breath, while also being able to maintain your cleave. I feel like that's one of the biggest strengths of breath.
Oh, sure. But I was like, so biceps. Like, just circling back, because I know you like Unholy more, man, and we're gonna go there. So this is the thing, right? How would you compare, I don't know, like the general Mythic Plus playstyle from Unholy versus Breath? I mean, I'm sure you're gonna be super objective, but give it a cheap shot, man.
I think the main thing to focus on is the way the cooldowns align. So Frost is very much a 2-minute cooldown spec. So if you can pull big every 2 minutes, Frost excels heavily. Unholy, you essentially have cooldowns for every single pack there is. Obviously, you're going to be bursting more whenever you have your Abomination Limb if you're playing Necrolord. But overall, Unholy Blight, Dark Transformation, if you run that build, they come up essentially every pack. So you have very consistent damage throughput. So I think with an uncoordinated group, Unholy might excel because you don't need to rely on the tank pulling around you. Whereas Frost, obviously you do very well in an uncoordinated one, but you excel much more in a coordinated group. It's kind of like previously when you played Unholy in BFA, right? You wanted the tank to pull around your cooldowns because you could do such insane amount of damage if you pulled correctly. The rules have kind of reversed a little bit, but it's not the same degree, but still a little bit like that.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that as well. With Frost Scythe going uncapped in 915, I do see Frost having the potential to do that really good, consistent AoE with Ice Cap. Question is whether it's going to be worth the loss in single target or not.
So you see that? So you think Frost Scythe is going to make a return?
Only for Ice Cap. For the other builds, it's not a chance.
And when you say uncapped, do you mean like soft cap after 8 targets or actual uncapped?
It's going to be square root scaling after 5 targets, which
5 targets.
It's going to be a little bit not linear, but you could basically think of it as linear scaling after 5 targets, basically doubling the damage that you would do at 5 targets up to 20 targets. So, and
I assume that the Razor S application is still, uncapped.
I think that's important to mention because honestly, Frost Scythe, I can kind of see it taking the place of Bursting Source and Infected Claws for Unholy. Like if you're running a big fortified key as Unholy, you can run Infected Claws and Bursting Source. I think Frost Scythe can come into play in that similar scenario. I don't know, Muffin, what do you think? But you obviously sacrifice on a single target, but I feel like that extra 15% frost damage is quite huge in a big pack.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say as well. Like I feel Frost Scythe is only really gonna be or see play even in other specs on Ice Cap if you're doing big pulls because you want Razor Eyes on everything. And you're going to be playing Biting Cold anyway to increase your Mortis Winter damage by 30%, and then you get 15% on top from Razor Eyes, which is also a big damage increase.
Like, I can imagine you run in, you do your Frost Sight until you've stacked all your Razor Eyes, and then just go back to hitting Obliterate to get those Rhyme procs. Things like that could potentially happen.
All right. And you mentioned that Frostside was going to go really well with Ice Cap Taze. And I think when we did the Frost Decay script and you guys helped us out, I think Biceps mentioned that Ice Cap is not that bad, because I was kind of jokingly trashing it in the script, because and it's not about the numbers. Personally, for me, it's just apparently how boring it is for last row talent, considering, like, I mean, when you put it against Breath, I mean, come on. But if it's gonna come back, it's gonna come back. And I think we can talk, or you guys obviously developed this idea of the last row talent, because it kind of defines builds, the three more or less builds that Frost has. Obviously, some are good in raids and dungeons both. Ice Cap is Obliteration, is probably better just in raids, at least now. What do you guys think about the actual balance of the last row? How different are the two playstyles in terms of damage output, both single target and AoE? So, you know, both raids and dungeons, although Sanctum is, I guess, more AoE than it is single target.
This is a tough one, honestly, because if you look at purely sim numbers, then all three last row talents are actually pretty dang close to each other, which is incredibly surprising, because Ice Cap doesn't seem like it'd be a thing right now. But the issue stems from once you actually put that into reality. If you're playing Ice Cap and you have to run away from boss, you're done. Your DPS is not going to be good. That's just how it is. Obliteration and Breath don't really suffer from that. So it's what kind of relegates Ice Cap to the AoE only or Mythic Plus type scenarios. But otherwise, I think they're balanced pretty fine. Obliteration might be a little bit undertuned, but that's really, it's got its strengths, but right now we just haven't been able to take advantage of them.
It's quite obvious when you look at logs that top logs pretty much always play Breath. And that's not necessarily because they get more single target from Breath. It's because Breath works very well as single target and AoE. So what you can do is pick Breath and be fine everywhere. If you were to play Obliteration, you would have to swap back and forth. Your gear wouldn't be optimized for both. It just makes it a bit more difficult. So the easiest thing for everyone to do, and generally the best way to do it, is just pick Breath and run it everywhere. You can look at some single target fights. Obliteration will show up. People do run it for pure single target, but then you also have, most fights have some kind of cleave. Frost is excellent at getting some good old cleave pad with Breath and stuff. So obviously those logs are going to top. That's just what happens.
And even if you want your priority damage, Breath still excels because you have extra runic power from extra adds, and then that also adds to Breath's single target even more. And it helps all in all.
So they're way more balanced than people like to think, because obviously we have, the min max, and if you're going to play to the max, you're gonna take the 1 to 5% more damage, but obviously not like probably. Judging by the stats that we've pulled up out of our ass, over 90% of the players are not able to play perfectly Frost Decay. So whether or not they play Breath or Ice Cap or Obliteration, as long as they play better Frost in general, they're probably going to do way more damage than somebody that plays meta, is not really that good at the meta spec. So this is kind of what we're trying to, point out in some of our videos, that just meta is not like, if you see it on MDA, it doesn't mean that you can pull it off. It doesn't mean that if it's not on MDA it's not good, because obviously you have people that, man, I cannot get into groups as Frost Decay, and then you get into groups and you're number one damage, and I was like, okay, come on.
And it does sound like Biceps mentioned, like Breath is an all-in-one thing. Like it works good in single target, works good in AoE as well, which does make me think like Obliteration, like that talent roll, even though if it doesn't seem to be that much different, it's just I would say comfort. It's like switching between something doesn't really make sense if one talent can bring it all to the table. So maybe, I don't know, do you guys see that as an issue? Because I know from pure numbers it's pretty close,
maybe that's why Blizzard didn't even touch it too much.
Yeah, maybe they said, "Oh, fuck it."
Maybe this is the reason why they don't touch Frost talents in general. Because I mean, I think at this point, Frost Decay is maybe the most ignored spec in the game in terms of talents. I want to say Survival too, because Survival didn't receive any changes since a couple of years as well. But I know Enhancement, that's also like a historic
Survival Enhancement. Well okay, but Feral, yes. Okay. But in terms of like Frost Decay, obviously we can talk about issues within the talents, but are we looking at the last row to be like the biggest issue for Frost? I don't know. I feel like that's not it. Maybe there's something else in different rows. Maybe the boys can touch upon this a little bit.
I guess I'll start out with this one. There are lots of issues in Frost Talents tree. The biggest ones tend to stick out are Gathering Storm. It's just way too goddamn powerful, honestly. It's an issue because it leaves those other two talents in that row entirely unused. Even though Glacial Advance could be very useful for stuff like two-handed obliteration, it just does not do enough damage to compete with Gathering Storm. Then you add into the equation stuff like Biting Cold and Everfrost, and it's just got no chance. So that's the biggest one that stands out in the tree outside of the last row. Frost Scythe comes up a lot as well, because that's just been undertuned ever since they changed the way Killing Machine works for Obliterate. And that is an issue. I do think that they need to up the damage a little bit there, maybe just a little bit, up to 20% attack power per target instead of 14.98, I think it is. So just a little bit of a buff in Frost Scythe could be very much back in the game in terms of other builds. But right now it's just everything's either way too strong or doesn't really have a place.
I'm going to be the opposite here, because I feel like a lot of the talent points actually do see play in different areas of the game. Like the first one, you have Inexorable Assault, Cold Heart, you can actually pick up Icy Talents. Next one, you have Runic Continuation, Murderous Efficiency. I feel like there's like lots of talents do see play, but I do heavily agree with Gathering Storm. It blocks Frost from having a healthy runic power economy in AoE. Currently, you just have too much runic power in AoE. You kind of don't care if you overcap, and that's obviously feels bad. And it feels like the spec isn't designed right if you just sit and overcap a resource all the time. Obviously, you have your breath, and then nice, you can use it, but in the downtime,
you just ignore it.
Not much use. Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't feel like it should be the case. You shouldn't just ignore a resource in a specific circumstance, right?
I mean, it plays some purpose right now. You got to keep that Unleashed Frenzy up, man.
Yep.
I wanted to point out, because last time I played Unholy Jesus Frost for an extended period of time was, I think, an 8.3, and I don't recall, unless I've missed it, over the course of 8.3 beta and now release of Shadowlands, them addressing that row in any particular way. Did they do that actually, or what happened? Because Gathering Storm was good, but it wasn't like the only good option there. But all of a sudden, Gathering Storm is like the best. Is it because of Biting Cold? I mean, you don't always run Biting Cold, right? So did they change the scaling? Is it just how the encounters work? Is it something baseline to the kit?
The only thing that was changed on that row from 8.3 to now was Glacial Advance applying Razor Ice even if you don't have a Rune Forged, but that's the only change that's happened.
No.
Frost Worm as well, right?
Yeah, Frost Worm, they replaced Frost Worm was a talent and you got Hypothermic Presence.
Hypothetic presence.
Hypothetic.
True. But you still ran Gathering Storm even in 8.3 and like before that as well. There's never really been a real contender, I think, for a long time other than Gathering Storm.
Okay.
Yeah, they just like to throw blanket buffs onto Remorseless Winter, and it's getting old at this point because it makes Gathering Storm stupid strong and needs to change.
I wanted to move a little bit into 915 as well, seeing as how, because I wanted to pose a question. Obviously, the question is not as important as the general topic itself, but it does give a good segue into 915 and the fact that they're finally pulling the ripcord. How viable do you guys think Night Fae Obliteration Frost Decay is? And if this isn't even an argument that we can make, how viable can other builds or other ways to play Frost Decay in 915 can be if Covenant choice isn't a gate anyway for people to actually enjoy the spec?
Guess I'll start this one off as well. So Night Fae Obliteration can be incredibly potent, like insanely potent, especially with a two-handed weapon. But it has one massive drawback in Mythic Plus right now, and that's the fact that tanks have to move. And they move out of your Death's Due, and you're done. No more damage for you. Other potential builds gets a little bit finicky there because like the Kyrian changes are going to be really nice for AoE. So you may actually see some Kyrian Breath in AoE, probably running the Kelia Soulbind, which is actually really nice. Probably end up the same way for Ice Cap. But for Obliteration, it's in an awkward spot where in Mythic Plus you'd probably want to run Night Fae, but it's a gamble if you're in a pug or something and your tank's not going to be communicating with you, or you're not able to communicate with your tank.
It's basically.
I mean, that is true. At the same time, there are specs like Elemental Shaman who actually really want tanks to keep things in one place. Although we can argue Earthquake versus Death and Decay, who actually has a cooldown, or Death's Due in this case. So if that can not be an issue, or at least it can be a mitigated issue, then Night Fae Obliteration might actually see more play, at least be a little bit more competitive. Because I know for a fact that I personally like Obliteration. It's when I go with like all sorts of pug groups, because personally I'm a big fan of Breath, and I think Breath is probably the most interesting mechanic that Frost has. But it's a pain with pugs when they constantly move, when nobody kicks, and and I don't kick because I want the damage.
Yeah.
I think one major issue with the Night Fae Obliteration is that it scales up to 2 targets and then it doesn't scale anymore, right? That specific part of the build. And that obviously becomes a problem if you're pulling much larger when you want like breath and things like Muffin said. Frost is good because we have several abilities that scale, continue scaling. Obliteration, Night Fae doesn't really do that. So I'm not quite sure how competitive it actually would be. I don't know, Muffin, would you ever play Night Fae Obliteration?
Only place I could maybe see it is in TOP, but then you kind of want your Necro. But yeah, that's kind of the only place where I feel like you pull small enough to make use of Death's Due.
All right. Mind if I interject here with a little bit of a fact related to this?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're two-handed Obliteration playing Night Fae, a single Killing Machine Obliterate will deal more damage than an 8-target Frost Scythe.
Oh.
Just wanted to point that out to show how kind of puny Frost Scythe is at the moment.
Hey, Blizzard, make Frost Scythe scale with Might of Frozen Wastes.
Yeah, full tiers. That would be great. Just easy fix.
Just to play off on this, do you guys think that Death's Due pointed out? I mean, it's not like it's a surprise, but do you think it pointed out like a major difference between Frost and the other 2 DK specs, where Death and Decay is supposed to help you cleave stuff, and as far as I know, it doesn't for Obliterate? I mean, it would be pretty strong if it did. Do you think that after Shadowlands, maybe they can make that a talent or a passive or something where Death and Decay can offer some, core rotational cleave for Frost as well, like it does for Blood and Unholy?
I mean, I could potentially see, not necessarily for next time, but you could make Frost Strike cleave. That is a way you can spend runic power in AoE.
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah, there are some issues with going with a setup where D&D is kind of vital to Frost. If you did Frost Strike Cleave, for example, it kind of conflicts directly with stuff like Glacial Advance and Breath of Syndragosa. You'd kind of have to make it a talent to replace Hypothetic Presence on that row with a talent that makes, Frost Strike Cleave in D&D. And that may be a viable option there. It's just going to be a matter of if they're willing to do that and still let it conflict with Breath.
And okay, because this is just a personal pet peeve of mine, but since you guys play, and especially Muffin, since he plays a lot more Frost than probably everybody, do you feel like not having an AoE resource spender is hindering you in any way? So I'm mostly talking from like a very, very basic perspective, since we kind of dabble into all of the specs, and I'm trying to think of any other spec that generates a resource and spends it and doesn't have an AoE spender that has a talent into. So I'm curious to know what you think, and how do you play with this mentality into M+ mostly, I guess.
I mean, right now you just build up. You just sit on 100 runic power and you just spam your runes because you want Gathering Storm stacks. And the only reason you frost strike is to get rune proc so you can obliterate some more. Because you want more AoE. So it's kind of
So not only is the problem, it's annoying. You double dip into, it's like, okay, just ignore it. It's like, what? Runic power who?
you just use your runic power just so you have a chance to get a rune.
Runes are just so much more powerful. You know, hitting obliterate, 4% chance of triggering Rhyme proc, which is proper AoE, and also extending your Gathering Storm window. It's just every rune is just insanely more useful compared to spending, 20 runic power. It's not even comparable when you look at damage output per execute time.
And do you guys think that this can potentially change? Obviously, Hope is a little bit skeptical right now with Blizzard and how they're changing, although it seems like they're addressing a couple of cool things in 9.1.5. Still not addressing anything for Frost as far as I could tell, aside from the AoE cap. Do you think there's a possibility that at least this core mechanic can be addressed? And if so, do you have a preferred way where this can be addressed?
I think I want to see Gathering Advance, sorry. Is that Glacial Advance? Sorry. I want Glacial Advance buffed. I want to see it usable in single target so that it brings some extra single target. Like one big reason with Gathering Storm is that it does tons of AoE, but it also buffs a single target. And it's always a difficult choice to pick something that deals AoE with no single target versus something that deals good AoE with also good single target. So Glacial Advance, make it do like more damage on your primary target, something like that would be fun. And just make it a competitive option. It would just be nice to see a Frost DK where you can spend your runic power. Also, obviously, Glacial Advance has this really weird animation that can get stuck on stairs. You can get stuck everywhere. Just get it like a frontal cleave or whatever. Makes it easier to use, essentially.
Could even like
That's
make blinding sleet kind of thing, where it's just a frontal.
Yeah, exactly. Just a frontal would be fit very nicely, like Frost Scythe.
Yeah, another thing with buffing Glacial Advance that'd be super healthy is giving two-handed obliteration a chance in single target. That way you could roll Fallen Crusader on your weapon, get Razor Ice from Glacial Advance, and that could very well be a very viable setup and give two-handed Frost an edge in single target even.
I can see a couple of these in the future tier sets. I don't know, man. It's like if they decide to address anything in 9.2, because I don't think they'll address anything like this in 9.5.
No,
it's basically major general gameplay shit. But in 9.2, I can 100% see them doing like a tier set, something bonus for Frost, like making the Glacial Advance thingy, like deal more damage to first target and something like that. But again, this is something that they kind of got, I don't know, they set a trend with this. So they're fixing things on external stuff, right? If this were to happen, okay, this is, a welcome change. But if they do it on a tier set, then by 10.0, well, see ya.
Well, that's the thing, because even if they address just the base scaling of Glacial Advice, there won't be anything new. They've just addressed, what is it, Psychic Link for Shadow Priest, just in 9.1.5, I think, not even 9.2. So it's not like it's hard for them to balance. My skeptical mind says that they're just either not playing Frost Decay enough, or maybe they think, oh, this build does enough damage, we don't have a priority to address Frost Decay. Any kind of design changes. But I mean, people like it a lot, and people want to like it even more. I mean, they've freaking asked for two-handers for a while now.
That was one of the major things on their 9.1.5 developers kind of blue post that they did. They're talking about buffing underused conduits as well as underused talents. We haven't seen much of any of that come to fruition yet. So we may very well see a Glacial Advance buff in 9.1.5. I'm hoping that some conduits get buffed too, because right now Frost and Unholy using a tank conduit, like, come on, Blizzard, that's not supposed to be a thing.
I didn't know about that. What?
Yeah, we use Adaptive Armor Fragment. It's not.
Right.
Our conduits are so bad.
Oh wow!
Isn't that a general one? I thought
it's
that
a
was
generic tank one. Yes, you need to actually go into your tank spec when you want to upgrade it. because it won't automatically update your when you're in your DPS stack. It's not viable because it's a tank one.
I'm guessing I don't know how much the devs are looking at, you know, things like logs and, you know, performance overall, but maybe they're not looking at external websites, but I'm pretty sure they have some internal data where they can see like, okay, conduits for DKs. I don't know, Ian, what do you think of this? Should we?
I think they're actually. My opinion is that they might be looking too much at just the numbers. Wasn't Frost DK pretty high up in the rankings at the beginning of the tier and raid at least?
In 9-1?
Yeah, 9-1. It was doing pretty well and it started to trail off a little bit. I think this is, you know, just the average, you know, ups and downs of the logs. And maybe they saw something like that. It's like, oh, Frost DK is going on. You know, touch Frost DKs. And
was it? Because I remember we left it in 9.0.5 was Unholy was kind of king. Then there was that whole debate with AMZ and everybody was like doom and gloom. Oh, DKs are bad. Blah.
Unless I'm misremembering, I'm pretty sure Frost was at the top half still in the beginning of 9.1, no? Or
but the thing is that with Frost DK can often leverage, you know, burst cleave, and any class kit can do that. Just shoots up in the damage meters because you'll generally have a couple bosses which just Frost DK, so so much cleave pad that, you know, the DPS numbers are high, but they don't have useful DPS.
Yeah.
Like you have the 9, which they were very good at. You had Painsmith because you were just holding DPS, and then when everything comes down, you have all your cooldowns and you can cleave on them as well. So it's just
Soul Render as well.
Soul Render as well.
Fate Scribe also has nice cleave. Just tons of examples of why Frost as well.
What do you guys think it kind of dropped in the last couple of weeks? Just other specs just finding their buttons, or how does this even work? Like it's really good in the first few weeks and then it starts to trail off. I mean, it doesn't get worse clearly, but
one important aspect here is that the rankings only include a specific set of bosses. So Frost DK is not very popular. You won't see lots of rankings on the high-end bosses. So whenever those rankings trickle in, that can significantly alter the overall rankings. So if you have like one Frost DK that kills Sylvanas and doesn't do well, that can have a big impact on the overall ranking if you look at those, for instance. So just there's high volatility early, and there's generally not too much to read from looking at the overall rankings. Whenever I get to comment on like a specific movement, I'm essentially always saying, you know, randomness happens. This isn't a big change with the spec that it dropped because everything else scaled better. Doesn't happen that much.
Only other thing that brought Frost down a bit is its item level scaling with conduits isn't very great. They gain like, you know, 1% total DPS from going from like rank 7, I think it was, to rank 11 where it's at now, which is kind of pathetic, honestly.
1%.
That's a big downfall on Holy, really. It was king in 9.0, but really doesn't scale well with conduits, and Frost kind of feels the same.
That is important, you guys brought it up, and I was going to ask you guys about like legendaries as well. Is there like any issues you guys could see on legendaries currently? Something that can maybe get tuned or changed for Frost?
Not really, honestly. Frost legendaries are actually in a really good spot. They all have good use cases, which is pretty uncommon for legendaries.
Let's keep it like that.
I think all legendaries actually have use. We have 4, right? Which is 4 strictly on Frost ones, which you can use all 4 for specific cases. You would use. You have the Frostborn one, which is really good in PvP. You have Kaltira's Favor, which is also really good on single target. And Rage can also be used on single target. You have Biting Cold, which is really good on AoE. So you can use all 4, which is not very common for specs in general. You always have like, you get this or this, and that's it.
Pretty cool.
Surprisingly enough, Legendary is one of the few things that they managed to balance properly for Frost. Not very many specs have 3 to even 4
You want to talk about my druid legendaries? I have 11.
11
for all specs. It's ridiculous. But yeah, now this is the first time we have Muffin on the show. I was really curious to ask him. I know this is from previous. I know we said that we're not going to get into it like as we did so in the past episode, but I'm really curious to see where he stands on this. So this is just for Muffin because I know what you guys said last time. But Muffin, where do you see Frost Decay had its best time? Like encompassing everything, rotation, performance, theme, whatever, fantasy. When do you see in which expansion or which patch did you see Frost Decay as being like, okay, this is kind of complete, if that ever existed?
I don't know if I would say Frost was ever complete. I always felt like there was something missing in Frost. Like I don't feel like there has been ever like a complete thing. I always felt like Frost is like, okay, you run these talents and it doesn't change if you go single target or AoE.
Right.
It's always like, these are the talents you run and you never really switch, for example. And yeah, I just felt like always Frost has had something missing to it, but I don't really know what it is. I mean, I loved Frost in 8.3, but that was mostly because of corruption, right?
Man, I don't know.
Making stuff fun.
Do I feel like, I think I sense this to a lot of people. Are we kind of looking fondly on corruptions? Corruption is actually good because I don't know. I hated it.
I mean, corruption was good once they came with a vendor.
Right. Yeah, that is true. But that was like super late. What was it? 8.3.5, and even that was semi-gated, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was on a rotation. That was weird. So that's
Yeah, didn't really make sense why it would come on a rotation, but
well, you got to have some metrics going. Still, even at the end of the expansion cycle, so
you cannot get your corruption the first week and then stop playing for a couple of months. Nah, you gotta get that sub going.
No, but let's not derail it. Sorry, Taze, you wanted to say something?
I was just gonna say, corruption was fun once you had it, but getting it was a pain.
It was a bitch, yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember.
Did you run Ice Cap back then, Muffin? Or still Breath?
I played Breath for the start and at the end, but I played a lot of Ice Cap in the middle of it.
Yeah, this is why I was asking at the beginning if you always played Breath, because I remember our guides in I think 8.1 and 8.2, there was always Ice Cap involved, and you were constantly bitching about it.
I think in 8.3 as well. Well, for me, Ice Cap was always boring until they had Frostwhelp Indignation, and I don't remember if Icy Citadel was also tied to Ice Cap or was it too. Yeah, and obviously when you could play with Cold Streak is it? Chill Streak. That was so cool. Maybe it wasn't the best, but it was so fun to play in Mythic Plus. That's when I played the Frost Decay the most, and I had a major blast. So when they've added the Magus and the thing for Unholy to the towns and added all those cool things to the towns, and they didn't do so for Frost for Ice Cap. I was like, man, why keep such a bland ability when you could add so many cool things? And I feel like that's just a major loss on Unholy. Obviously, since Ice Cap is probably sim-wise close to the others, that would just be OP, but numbers can always be tuned down. But I feel like that would just make the cooldown a little bit more interesting. And personally, they did mention this, and maybe you guys can elaborate on this more as well, that they wanted one thing for Torghast is to test things that they could implement on live, outside Torghast. And personally, as much Frost I've done in Torghast, the most fun that I've ever had playing the actual rotation is like not crazy numbers, was when I got that animal power that made me had Ice Cap and Obliteration at the same time. And that just felt like, oh my God, this is how both of these talents should be played. I don't know if this can ever be a thing. And if it is, obviously they would have to tweak the talents around and the damage round, and that's perfectly fine. But I felt like playing either Obliteration or Ice Cap had to include the other one to actually feel like it's as fun as Breath. It's as fun as, Army of the Damned or anything like that. So I don't know why you guys stand on this, if you think that they can take something cool out of Torghast, put into Frost, and if it is, what do you guys think they could add to make the spec, a little bit feel like it's not missing something?
Is there something in Torghast that could potentially go on live?
Fun fact, Ice Cap was actually played with Obliteration back in Legion.
Well, there you go.
So, but Obliteration was a bit different, but you still got Killing Machine procs, and you had Howling Blast, but you still had a lot of pillars, right? Because Ice Cap wasn't the last pro talent. So I felt that was very fun still.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of inherent flaws with that. You really have to tune the talents, and the issue with that kind of stems from both Ice Cap and Obliteration by themselves don't really have a tuning knob that they can use to really get them to the right spot. If you tune something for either of those, it's also going to tune it for breath. So that's the only issue I see with that setup, is they don't really have a direct way to make it tunable without also tuning down breath or something of the sort.
Like from actual abilities you guys found in Torghast, is there anything that you guys saw that could potentially be implemented on?
I think I mentioned this last time we spoke, but when you press Icepump Fortitude and you get this dragon coming down.
Oh yeah,
not just take that and make that the Frostbolt Indignation and put that instead of Hypothermic Presence. I think that'd be fun. You don't have this kind of new player trap when they play Frostbolt and then you just pull everything in dungeon, right? If it's just in a circle around you, much easier to use, doesn't lose much power, and fits perfectly with the combination of Ice Cap and some AoE addition in that row. I would love to see it. Yeah, but I think it's they're probably not going to swap around talent at this point.
What you're saying? So what you're saying is that you want Icepump Fortitude to proc a Frostborn's Fury, or whatever the animal power is.
Just that effect, but remove the Icepump Fortitude bit and use the pillar bit instead.
Oh, okay. Because I was remembering good karma from Windwalkers, where Windwalkers would use a defensive for offensive purposes, and they would run out of defensives. But yeah, that would be so cool, man.
That would be very good. Yeah. I agree. That sounds like something that could be very interesting, at least.
Yeah, I wish there was more Frost powers in Torghast, but so many of them are just unholy centric. It makes it really hard. So there's not really much in Torghast that you could really add to Frost, because it's all just based on unholy stuff.
So Monstrous Concoction doesn't work. Is that what you're saying?
It works. You just you get radiating death coils and you have fun. But
it is strange in Torghast, because they took Unholy's toolkit, gave it to Frost, and then just did all the Torghast powers around that shared toolkit, which is really unholy, right? To be honest, who thinks throwing out death coils is a really Frost thing to do? I don't know. Maybe they did Unholy, and then they felt like, we could use this Frost as well. Let's just
go to the next class. I don't know. GG Codex.
Yeah, it did feel that for a lot of the aspects of even classes and classes performing into different aspects of the game. I don't know if it was laziness or if it was not enough time or actually not enough manpower. Honestly, don't know at this point anymore. But it did feel like from ever since Legion, things kind of got more and more dry for a lot of them, which is interesting because we kind of talked about this a lot in terms of like actual balancing for, I would say, mid-tier content, not super high end, but mid-tier content to decent high content. I think balancing overall looks a lot better than maybe any of the expansions. So they did something right over there. Obviously, we can nitpick on a lot of things, how you feel on playing your spec or whatever, and, some talents not working and synergies and whatnot. But in the grand scheme of things, whatever they didn't address, it kind of worked out in the, general, I would say, performance of the specs, which boils down to, okay, do you enjoy playing Frost Decay for its theme, for, the sensation you get when you do your rotation right or whatever, or do you play it purely for the numbers? I guess this is the ultimate question. High, super high. I don't know, Muffin. I think you can answer this. Maybe you play for both, right? Because obviously you said you love Frost Decay, but you also do some nice damage, right?
I do some nice damage, but it's nothing like boomy damage, like holes and stuff.
Well, yeah.
Well, boomies are just different.
Performance-wise, you guys can probably answer this better. If we were to have a hypothetical ceiling to how well a class can perform, that ceiling would probably be higher in the Mythic Plus, since there's obviously it keeps on scaling past whatever Mythic rating mechanics can bring. Because at the end, I mean, clearly at the end, everybody does. Every spec is represented in the Mythic race. Well, not Mythic race, but Mythic rating in general, and it's kind of true for Mythic Plus as well, at least up until like 22s, 23s. Last time I checked, I think the lowest key I've ever seen a spec cleared in terms of like the highest key possible was 22. If that makes any sense. So if like the worst spec in Mythic Plus can clear a 22 at its highest, then obviously everybody else is pretty well off, because not a lot of people can do 20s and higher. But in that grand scheme of things, Muffin, in the Mythic Plus grand scheme of things, where things can, you know, scale way higher than in raids, how do you feel Frost performs? Maybe compared to the rest, maybe just compared to the content, because obviously if you're going to compare it to, I don't know, Fire Mage...
maybe compared to other melees.
It's probably Fire Mage isn't going to be a good comparison for anybody right now, but does it get its job done? Obviously it does, but like, can you elaborate a little bit about how do you feel when you play Frost in a big key?
But I mean, I have fun, but it feels like you still get like overshadowed by like a lot of other classes that do play those high keys. Like, you have your damage, but it feels like other classes still do more, and they also have more utility. And I feel like the only thing Frost really has for it is like, it's still pretty tanky. Like, especially as Necro with Fleshcraft, you have AMS, if you run the Conduit, you also turn Lichborn into a defensive. You have Icebound and Fleshcraft, you have 4 defensives on a relatively good cooldown, and you're really tanky, but it still feels like other classes just have more damage, more utility, and the only thing that you have, I feel that other classes don't, is a grip.
And that's pretty good.
And multiple grips at Abomination Lib.
Yeah, I think
but
that's
even if with A-Bomb you can still bring a Druid, you can Vortex Typhoon and you have the same effect.
Oh man, that's so true.
We're circling to Druids again.
Hey, quick question, Muffin. How do you play A-Bomb Limb in Spiteful Weeks?
You pop on pull and hope it doesn't die before Spiteful comes out.
Man, I think when I did some practice on my Frost, I don't know what week it was. I think it was also Sanguine, but I got him all of the bullshit that even as I wasn't, you know, that experienced with breath. Everything that could stop my breath stopped my breath.
Oh man. Yeah.
Like, as a player that's still playing on Storming Week, I hate Storming. I absolutely hate Storming.
Oh yeah.
You could definitely have some of them, but you're gonna sit there with a breath for 40 seconds. You're only immune to knock up for 8 of them, or 10.
It's totally understandable. I don't remember if I addressed this in the first episode of Frost, but I'm gonna go there since I know I addressed it in the Unholy. So, coming from the perspective of a non-Frost DK player or non-DK player overall, like, how would you guys, advise or even advertise a brand new player to get into Frost? It doesn't feel as daunting as Unholy. Like, the minute I made my Unholy DK and I looked at everything over there, I was like, oh boy. Oh my God. Frost seemed a little bit more straightforward. So is that the case? Or I don't know, how would you like, just give a couple of tips to brand new players who are thinking about picking up Frost but are a little bit scared or something?
Yeah, so Frost DK at its core is incredibly simple. There's not a whole lot of mechanics to really worry about when it comes to the base spec itself. But one of the things about it that's really cool is the really niche things, like little min-maxy things that you can do to really up your DPS or really up your game, such as stupid simple things that just make sense when you think about them, like macroing a Howling Blast into Pillar of Frost if you're playing Obliteration, so you can instantly proc a Killing Machine as soon as you press that button. Just little stuff like that makes it really fun to optimize, but not in a super complicated way. Only time Frost gets like super complex and kind of hard to play is around Breath, but that's something that's more not really a player skill thing, but player experience thing.
I think one good aspect is that you have 2 distinct playstyles. So you have what you do outside of cooldowns, and then you have what you do inside of cooldowns. The playstyle outside of cooldowns is very simple. It's 4 buttons. That's all there is. And I feel like it's easy to get into that because you generally just You press Obliterate, you press whatever shines when you get procs, and that's kind of it. And then you have your cooldowns, you have your Obliteration, right? And then you have your Breath. And then you just need to learn how to play those. And once that's done, you're good to go. And I think that makes it nice that it's simple outside of cooldowns, and the cooldowns are just very distinct, so you can learn those quickly as well.
Oh, I just agree. Like, it's very simple. You just spend runes, spend runic power, press shiny button. That's it.
and it doesn't seem you have a lot of issues with runes, at least not in AoE, from what I understand from the discussion.
No runic power issues.
Right. Now, I'm gonna circle back on it. So specifically for breath, like if talking about Mythic Plus and stuff, you said you get more experience with that and you learn how to deal with it and maintain it and whatnot. How much is that your part of the problem or part of the job, let's say, and how much are you reliant on your tank, your group, or whatever? I'm asking this just as an outsider, because I remember when Flame was playing his Frost, he was complaining a lot about the tank doing shit and not keeping them in place, or something happening, or people not CCing, or somebody always was responsible for him fucking up the breath window. So I'm just curious, how is the responsibility getting shared here for managing breath?
Well, it specifically in Mythic Plus, I still feel like majority of it is still on you. You can still move and hit targets. Like, it's the same, like, people are also been talking about it in Raid. It's like, oh, you gotta move, so you can't keep up your breath, but you can still hit while moving. You can also pop your movement speed to stay up with the target and just keep hitting. It's not that big of an issue. The issue comes when you have to go away from a target. That's when you really just lose your breath, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's what sucks about it. But there isn't anything specifically in Mythic Plus, I feel like, where you just, okay, that's bad, you are just unlucky. But its majority is just on you, even if your tank is kiting.
So this means that Flame is full of shit.
So no, because I'm leveling my vengeance stage, so I'm probably not gonna jump around all over the place. I have to stay in place when you play in your Frost Decay.
And I mean, if you really want to target, just Chains of Acid and sit on it.
Oh, there you go.
I grip it back when the tank pulls it away. It's like, let me do my rotation. God damn it!
Well, that sounds pretty enticing. So I may switch to Frost a little bit to see how how things go. Yeah. But yeah, we're kind of getting close to the hour mark here. I was like going to ask you guys if there's like things we haven't touched, or if there's things you guys want to talk about specifically, we can go jump into them, because we kind of left out.
We didn't really talk about the tiers, the Shards of Domination gear, and how that affects both raiding and Mythic Plus. And
you mean the tier sets of
the tiers of domination sets?
Sets of shards. The Shards of Set Domination. What's it called again?
Shards of Domination.
It's bullshit is what it's called. That's what it's called.
Just making
I think one cool thing to highlight here is that Frost DK can run the Frost Domination set if it has a sufficient amount of crit. And it's quite an interesting one, because it brings so much survivability. Like, if you look at the healing meters for someone running a Frost spec, it's just very, very high. So for any players that want to run a high crit Frost Domination set, it is viable, you can run it, and it's also a great addition to your survivability.
And it's not RNG if you get to get an unholy proc in your cooldowns.
Would it work for non-breath builds?
No, that's the only thing. It kind of requires the breath critting constantly, as well as your Remorseless Winter, stuff like that. It's not nearly as good for Obliteration. It might be okay for Ice Cap, but I mean, honestly, Ice Cap and single target already is kind of like
stretch.
Okay.
Shards covered, check.
Shards of Domination.
Maybe a good old theory crafting fun fact. So in your Breath of Synagosa, you can get a free tick at the end if you play it correctly. I think it's fun to highlight because it's such an extremely min-maxy thing, but you can do it and you get like a damage of a Frost Strike worth of it. So Breath of Synagosa, it's quite weird. So at the start of a tick, which is 1 second, it checks, do you have enough runic power for this tick? If that's correct, it then waits a second, gets the damage, and then drains the runing power, right? So let's say you have 20 runing power, it checks your runing power, you're like, oh, you got 20, that's enough. 1 second goes by, you deal the damage, drains the runing power. Now, it doesn't check your runing power when it drains the runing power, right? So what you can do, if you have 25 runing power, you know that, okay, my breath is going to take, I'm going to drop below 16, so it's going to finish. I can then hit my frost strike within this 1 second, still get the breath synergos tick, but then have no runing power drain because you already spent it.
So it's like cheating.
It's like cheating, yeah. To be honest, though, I can't see anyone really doing this in a live scenario, but it's just a fun fact that you can do it and you can get a free frost strike, essentially.
For some reason, it reminds me of our government.
All right, just casually throwing it in there. I mean, it's a fun fact, and I provoke anybody to do it. Actually, hey Muffin, do you do this?
No.
Oh, come on, man.
I'm an avid user of using D&D to extend my breath to get one more tick in, though.
Oh, that also. There you go.
Not bad.
Because D&D, if your target is gonna stay inside of the death and decay, it does more than a naked howling blast without a proc. So it's a little bit.
The more you know.
Yeah, juicy stuff out of this episode. Everybody take notes now. This, things happening. But this is from the brilliant minds of the Icarus boys. So cannot go wrong.
I need to start mentioning that, because whenever people ask about depth and decay, I always be like, you can just ignore it. Like, it's fine to use an AoE. It deals good damage for the amount of runes you spend on it, but you can just ignore it and be fine. But this extending final tick, that's a good one. We'll definitely include that next. Thank you, Muffin.
Yeah, that was something me and Chu found out while playing around with the APL, actually.
You gotta give credit where credit is due, man.
It's gonna be in a new section in our 9.2 guide.
How about that? You do. And for all of you who have some extra time on your hands, okay, you can do this and this. But it does feel that maybe it's a little bit more easier to extend one more tick with D&D.
Yeah. I guess we kind of covered most of what changed and how Frost is in 9.1 as opposed to.
No, just don't want to speculate a little bit. I want to speculate because we present. I know we're talking to theory crafters, and if there's one thing theory crafters hate is speculating, because all these guys and gals are all about exact numbers. All right, so speculating is not their thing. However, we're all humans. We like to imagine things, hope for things. I don't know. So
we have Pornhub.
It's mostly in regards to possible tier sets. I know we touched a little bit on this. Tier sets may be changing some inner workings of talents or whatever. But like, if there's one big glaring issue that could be fixed for Frost through a tier set, so that would be a band-aid, let's say a temporary fix or whatever. What would it be? What would you guys put into a tier set bonus and fix like a big issue for Frost? Maybe there isn't such a thing for Frost decays, but
maybe just add like a cool mechanic that can
maybe even maybe the
glacial advance.
Glacial advance or obliteration thing that Taze mentioned, but I don't know, maybe something else that you guys can see.
The tricky thing with that is that you generally don't have tier sets affecting talents, which is unfortunate. But you can have,
Yeah, I was gonna say you could just take one of the old tier sets. Honestly, they have been good or like decent. Even if I don't feel like you always have to come up with something new. You could use something that you've used before.
Shattering Strikes, maybe that was quite a fan favorite.
I love Shattering Strikes.
Well, please.
Even the every X amount of runic power spend increases the duration of Pillar, for example, as well from Tomb. I think it was. I mean, it could work. It doesn't have to be the exact amount, but it could work. It's just anything I feel like could work as well.
That'd be interesting with the Pillar duration increase with Obliteration. Good synergy. Could potentially bring up Obliteration as the go-to single side spec, which is what I hope happens. It would be nice if you had the choice of going clear with Breath and then crossing top with Obliteration.
Same with Ice Cap. Could maybe extend it again.
Would the extension be rune-based or runic power-based? Because Obliteration doesn't really spend too much runic power.
Don't know. They would have to find out. I feel like
let Ian worry about that shit.
Well,
I mean-
Ian looks like he needs all the help he can get right now.
True.
true.
I feel like they'd have to tie it to a specific ability, like Frost Strike. If it was just per runic power spent, you'd end up doing some dumb stuff during breath.
But, sure, but at the same time, Taze, you gotta remember, like, I still feel like you get shafted if you tie it to Frost Strike, right? Then breath get fucked. The same with the Unleashed Frenzy conduit. It's really bad for Frost, but it's really strong for like outside, or like for breath on the outside, where you have the Icy Talons, which used to be Frost Strike, but is now changed to Runic Power.
Yeah, I guess you could tie it to runic power spent, similar to Gargoyle. That might work.
Well, I hope some of the boys at Blizzard being, so open now and
Yeah, and so transparent.
and everything like if somebody's like watching or listening to these, here's some free ideas.
You could say they're federally transparent.
Not going there, but we're Gucci. Well, I guess we can close it off. It's about that time. Definitely got me pumped once again. Every time we do one of these podcasts, I get pumped for the spec we talk about. I don't know what is it. It's maybe just the people talking about it, having the passion and explaining it.
The passion definitely translates.
Oh yeah.
And on an unrelated note, we should do more healer podcasts then.
Oh yeah. We're lacking on healers big time, but DPS is like still the most popular thing, in WoW. So it goes to show that the interest is definitely more on the DPS side.
We appreciate you guys coming over to talk about Frost, and hopefully 9.2 brings a lot more to talk about Frost, because God knows Frost could need it, and not if nothing, just because so many people really want to play Frost, and they're so loud, and they're so loud even when they cannot get into groups. So hopefully Blizzard recognizes, like, hey man, people really want to play Frost. Let's actually address Frost,
and also, guys, do make sure to check out all of the links in the description. For Taze, for Muffins, for Biceps, especially Biceps. He has the YouTube channel with a lot of guides for Unholy and advanced stuff over there. Pretty solid stuff. And also the WoW head guides and all of that. Everything in the description, top-notch boys. And also, if you're anything interested in anything DK, Acaris Discord, that's where it's at. So that being said, thank you, Taze. Thank you, Biceps. Thank you, Muffin. It's been a pleasure as always. And we'll catch you close to 9.2, I guess, when that PTR drops.
For having us.
Oh,
it was always a pleasure.
Always. So we'll meet again when the PTR drops for 9.2. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Make ice cap baseline.
All right. Thank you for watching, everybody. And remember to tune in every Monday on the Mocast channel. This is a brand new channel now. And also, if you don't like to watch the video, you can check us out on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple, iTunes, whatever you may like. I'm pretty sure you listen to this while you're working, while you're driving or something like that. So, just make sure you have it on all the platforms. We're everywhere.
Yeah, and you can check all the other episodes.
We're like DJ Khaled. Thank you, everybody. See ya next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.